Late at night, the city was wrapped in a cold, damp silence. Mark stood inside his dimly lit restaurant, wiping down the last table. The once vibrant place, filled with laughter and chatter, now felt like a hollow shell. The chairs were stacked on the tables, and only the ticking of the wall clock accompanied his thoughts. Mark sighed deeply, ran a hand through his graying hair, and headed toward the back door with a heavy trash bag in hand. The chill of the night air hit him as he stepped outside, the sound of rustling leaves filling the narrow alley. He paused, savoring the brief moment of solitude the night offered. Just as he was about to toss the bag into the dumpster, a soft noise caught his attention. He turned, squinting into the shadows. There, huddled in the darkest corner, were a man and a small girl. The man had a worn-out jacket wrapped around him, trying to shield the girl from the cold. She clung to him, her face buried in his side. Mark's heart tightened at the sight. "Are you all right?" he asked gently, careful not to startle them. The man looked up, his eyes wary but resigned. "We're sorry. We didn't mean to trespass. We have nowhere else to go." Mark took a step closer, his voice soft with concern. "I'm Mark, the owner of this place. What are your names?" The man hesitated before replying. "I'm David, and this is my daughter, Emily." Mark knelt to be at Emily's level and offered her a warm smile. "Hi, Emily. It's pretty cold out here, isn't it?" Emily nodded, her large eyes reflecting more wisdom than a child her age should have. "Yes, sir. It's very cold." Mark stood up and looked back at David. "You can't stay out here. It's too dangerous and cold. I have a small storage room inside. It's not much, but it's warm and safe. You can stay there for the night." David looked at Mark, disbelief mingling with hope in his eyes. "Why would you help us? We have nothing to offer in return." Mark glanced at his empty restaurant and back at David and Emily. "Because I know what it's like to be on the edge, looking down. I can't leave a little girl out in the cold. Come on, follow me." He led them inside, through the kitchen, and to a small room filled with boxes and old kitchen supplies. It wasn't ideal, but it was dry and warmer than the alley. Mark switched on a small electric heater in the corner. "I'll get you some blankets and something hot to eat," Mark said, heading back to the kitchen. As he prepared a simple meal, his mind wandered back to better days when the restaurant thrived, and he had more than enough to share. Now, helping David and Emily felt like a small way to reclaim some of that lost purpose. Inside the warm confines of the restaurant, Mark moved with quiet purpose. The dim lighting cast long shadows on the walls, and the soft hum of the heater in the storage room provided a gentle backdrop to the scene unfolding. Mark carried a tray laden with steaming soup, crusty bread, and a few blankets draped over his arm. He pushed open the storage room door gently, trying not to disturb the quiet peace that had settled over David and Emily. David looked up as Mark entered, his eyes reflecting a mixture of gratitude and lingering apprehension. Emily, now awake, clung to her father's side, her small frame dwarfed by his protective embrace. "I brought some food and blankets," Mark said softly, setting the tray down on a nearby crate. "It's not much, but it should help you warm up." David's face softened with relief. "Thank you, Mark. You've already done so much for us." Mark shrugged, offering a reassuring smile. "It's the least I can do. Everyone needs a little help sometimes." He handed a bowl of soup to David and another to Emily. "Eat up while it's hot." As they ate, a comfortable silence settled over the room. Mark watched as Emily cautiously tasted the soup, her eyes lighting up with each warm spoonful. The sight tugged at his heart, reminding him of how simple acts of kindness could make a world of difference. After a few moments, David broke the silence. "This place, it's nice. You must have worked hard to build it." Mark leaned back against a stack of boxes, sighing. "It used to be a lot livelier. Business has been slow lately, and I've been struggling to keep it afloat. But seeing you two here, it kind of puts things in perspective. Maybe there's more to this place than just serving food." David nodded, his expression contemplative. "I used to have a steady job, a home. But life has a way of throwing curveballs. One mistake led to another, and here we are." Mark listened intently, feeling a deepening connection to the man before him. "We all have our stories. Mine's not too different. This restaurant was my dream, but dreams don't always turn out the way we plan. Still, it's worth fighting for." Emily looked up from her soup, her eyes wide with curiosity. "Do you think we could stay here for a while? Just until we find our feet?" Mark's heart ached at the innocence in her voice. He glanced at David, who seemed torn between hope and the fear of imposing. "Of course," Mark replied gently. "You can stay as long as you need. We'll figure things out together." A faint smile touched David's lips, and he reached out to shake Mark's hand. "I don't know how to thank you. We'll do whatever we can to help. I'm handy with repairs and cleaning, and Emily can help with small tasks." Mark returned the handshake firmly. "Let's take it one day at a time. For now, just rest and get warm. We'll talk more in the morning." Leaving them to their meal, Mark retreated to the main area of the restaurant. The night was still and silent, the weight of his own struggles feeling a little lighter. As he cleaned up the kitchen, his mind wandered to the possibilities that lay ahead. Helping David and Emily had rekindled a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. The next morning, the first rays of sunlight filtered through the windows, casting a golden hue over the restaurant. Mark was already up, brewing fresh coffee and preparing a simple breakfast. He felt an unfamiliar sense of optimism as he set out plates and cups. David and Emily emerged from the storage room looking more rested. "Good morning," Mark greeted them with a smile. "I hope you slept well." David nodded, a hint of gratitude in his eyes. "We did. Thank you, Mark. Really." Emily's shy smile warmed Mark's heart. "Thank you, Mr. Mark," she echoed, her voice barely above a whisper. Mark waved off their thanks, pouring coffee for David and setting a glass of milk in front of Emily. "Let's eat, and then we can talk about what comes next." As they shared breakfast, the bond between them grew stronger. Mark learned more about David's skills and Emily's love for drawing. Ideas began to form in his mind about how they could work together to breathe new life into the restaurant. The sun streamed through the large windows of the restaurant, casting a warm glow over the empty tables. The morning bustle of the city was just beginning, and inside, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the scent of baked bread. Mark stood behind the counter, setting up for the day, his movements purposeful and calm. David emerged from the back room, rubbing the sleep from his eyes. He took in the scene with a sense of newfound hope. "Good morning, Mark. What can I do to help today?" Mark looked up, smiling warmly. "Morning, David. I was thinking you could start by sweeping the floor and wiping down the tables. Once the breakfast is over, we can tackle some of the repairs." David nodded, grateful for the chance to contribute. "Sounds good. And where's Emily?" As if on cue, Emily appeared, clutching a stack of papers and colored pencils. "Good morning," she chirped, her voice bright and cheerful. "Can I draw here, Mr. Mark?" "Of course, Emily," Mark replied, setting up a small table by the window for her. "You can use this spot as your art studio." Emily's eyes lit up with excitement. She settled into her new space, quickly becoming absorbed in her drawing. Mark watched her for a moment, a soft smile playing on his lips, before turning back to his tasks. The morning passed in a flurry of activity. Customers trickled in, enjoying their breakfasts and chatting amiably. David moved through the restaurant with purpose, his presence bringing a sense of order and efficiency. Mark noticed the way the regulars responded to David's polite demeanor, and it warmed his heart. As the breakfast rush wound down, Mark joined David at a table near the kitchen. "You're doing great, David. The place looks spotless." David smiled, a hint of pride in his expression. "Thanks, Mark. It feels good to be useful again." Mark leaned back, sipping his coffee. "I'm glad to have you here. This place, it's more than just a restaurant now. It's becoming a home." David nodded, glancing over at Emily, who was lost in her drawings. "Emily loves it here too. She's been through so much, but this place, it's like a safe haven for her." Mark followed David's gaze, his heart swelling with a mix of emotions. "She's a talented kid. I was thinking maybe we could display some of her artwork on the walls. It would add a personal touch to the place." David's eyes widened in surprise and gratitude. That would mean the world to her. "Thank you, Mark." As the day progressed, a new routine began to take shape. David proved to be a quick learner, picking up various tasks and taking initiative where needed. He repaired a broken chair, fixed a leaky faucet, and even helped Mark reorganize the storage room. Emily, meanwhile, transformed her little corner of the restaurant into a vibrant art gallery. Her drawings ranged from whimsical landscapes to heartwarming scenes of people and places she remembered. Customers often stopped by her table, admiring her work and chatting with her. Emily's laughter and enthusiasm were infectious, bringing a lively energy to the restaurant. One afternoon, Mark gathered David and Emily together. "I've been thinking," he began, looking at both of them with a serious yet hopeful expression. "This place has always been about community. You two have become a big part of that. How would you feel about making this arrangement more permanent?" David looked at Emily, who nodded eagerly. "We'd love that, Mark," David said, his voice filled with emotion. "This place has given us a new start. We want to be a part of its future." Mark smiled, feeling a sense of contentment he hadn't felt in a long time. Then it settled. "From now on, we're a team." As the days turned into weeks, the bond between Mark, David, and Emily grew stronger. They developed a seamless routine, each contributing in their own way to the restaurant's success. Mark found himself looking forward to each day, the weight of his previous struggles lifting bit by bit. Regulars returned more frequently, drawn by the warm atmosphere and the sense of belonging that permeated the place. New customers were welcomed with open arms, quickly becoming part of the extended family that Mark, David, and Emily had created. One evening, as the sun set and the restaurant began to quiet down, Mark stood by the window, watching the city lights flicker to life. David approached, a contented smile on his face. "It's been a good day," he said, looking out at the bustling street. Mark nodded. "Yes, it has, and there are many more good days ahead." The early morning sun cast a golden hue over the city as Mark unlocked the doors to his restaurant. The familiar scents of coffee and freshly baked bread filled the air, promising a busy and fulfilling day ahead. Mark was adjusting the chairs when the doorbell chimed. He looked up to see a woman with a camera around her neck, her face lighting up with curiosity and enthusiasm. "Good morning," she greeted, extending her hand. "I'm Clara, a blogger from the neighborhood. I've heard some wonderful things about this place." Mark shook her hand, a smile spreading across his face. "Nice to meet you, Clara. I'm Mark. Please come in." As Clara settled into a corner table, Emily approached with a tray of coffee and pastries. "Hi, I'm Emily. Can I get you anything else?" Clara smiled warmly at the young girl. "This is perfect, thank you. Your drawings are beautiful," she added, glancing at the colorful artwork adorning the walls. Emily blushed, her eyes sparkling with pride. "Thank you. Mr. Mark let me put them up." Clara looked around, taking in the atmosphere. "I've heard that Mark did something really special for you and your dad. I'd love to hear more about it." Emily nodded eagerly. "Daddy is helping Mr. Mark fix the restaurant, and I'm helping by drawing pictures. Mr. Mark is the best." Mark, who had been listening nearby, approached with David. "Clara, this is David, Emily's father." David extended his hand, a mix of gratitude and humility in his eyes. "Nice to meet you, Clara. Mark has been incredibly kind to us." Clara's eyes twinkled with interest as she turned to Mark. "I've heard bits and pieces, but I'd love to hear the full story. Would you mind sharing?" Mark glanced at David, who nodded in encouragement. Taking a deep breath, Mark began. "A few weeks ago, I found David and Emily huddled in the alley behind the restaurant. They had nowhere else to go, so I offered them a place to stay. Since then, they've become a part of our little family here." Clara listened intently, her fingers flying over her notepad. "That's truly inspiring. It's not every day you hear about such kindness. How has this experience changed things for you?" Mark smiled, a hint of pride in his voice. "It's brought new life to the restaurant. Our customers have noticed the difference, too. David's skills and Emily's artwork have made this place feel like a real community hub." David added, "It's given us a second chance. We're grateful every day for what Mark has done." Clara looked at Emily, who was drawing at her table. "And what about you, Emily? How do you like it here?" Emily looked up, her face glowing with happiness. "I love it. I get to draw and make new friends. And Mr. Mark's food is the best." Clara chuckled, jotting down Emily's words. "Thank you all for sharing your story. I can't wait to write about it." As Clara left the restaurant, the sense of excitement was palpable. David and Emily went about their tasks with renewed energy, and Mark felt a deep sense of accomplishment. The restaurant buzzed with a warmth that was contagious, drawing in customers who had become part of this growing community. A few days later, Clara's blog post was published, titled "The Heart of the Neighborhood, a Story of Kindness and Community." It quickly gained attention. The article praised Mark's generosity and highlighted the transformative power of simple acts of kindness. The response was immediate. Customers flocked to the restaurant, eager to support Mark, David, and Emily. The restaurant became a hive of activity, filled with laughter, conversations, and the clinking of cutlery against plates. One afternoon, as the lunch rush was winding down, Mark noticed a group of children gathered around Emily's art table. They were watching her intently as she demonstrated her drawing techniques. "You just have to imagine what you want to draw and then put it on paper," she explained, her voice filled with enthusiasm. Mark watched the scene with a sense of pride. He turned to David, who was repairing a chair near the kitchen. "This is what it's all about, isn't it?" David looked up, his eyes reflecting the same sentiment. "Absolutely. This place has become more than just a restaurant. It's a home for everyone." That evening, as the last customers left and the restaurant quieted down, Mark gathered David and Emily together. "I just want to say how proud I am of both of you. We've created something special here, and it's because of you." Emily hugged Mark, her eyes shining with gratitude. "Thank you, Mr. Mark. We couldn't have done it without you." David nodded, his voice filled with emotion. You gave us a chance when no one else would. We're forever grateful. Mark smiled, feeling a sense of fulfillment he hadn't experienced in years. The morning after Clara's blog post was published, Mark arrived at the restaurant to find a line of customers already waiting outside. The golden rays of dawn bathed the street, illuminating the eager faces of old patrons and curious newcomers alike. Mark couldn't help but smile as he unlocked the door, greeting everyone warmly. "Good morning, folks. Come on in," he called out, holding the door open as the crowd began to file inside. David was already busy in the kitchen, preparing for the day's rush. The familiar clatter of pots and pans mixed with the savory aroma of sizzling bacon and fresh coffee. He looked up as Mark entered, his eyes wide with excitement. "Looks like Clara's post worked wonders," David said, a grin spreading across his face. Mark nodded, feeling a swell of pride and gratitude. "Yes, it's amazing. We've got a busy day ahead. Let's give these people a reason to keep coming back." Emily was at her usual spot by the window, her art supplies spread out around her. She was working on a new drawing, but her eyes kept darting to the growing crowd. "Mr. Mark, do you think everyone will like my drawings?" she asked, a hint of nervousness in her voice. Mark knelt beside her, his voice gentle and reassuring. "They already love them, Emily. Just keep doing what you do best. You're a big part of what makes this place special." The morning rush began in earnest, with customers filling every table and the buzz of conversation creating a lively atmosphere. Clara's blog had painted the restaurant as a beacon of kindness and community, and the response was overwhelming. Regulars who had drifted away during the restaurant's tough times returned, and new faces filled the seats, eager to be part of the story they had read about. Mark moved through the restaurant with a renewed sense of purpose, taking orders, refilling coffee cups, and chatting with customers. The smiles and compliments from the patrons were invigorating, each one a reminder of the difference they were making. David seamlessly switched between the kitchen and the dining area, helping where he was needed most. His confidence grew with each task, and the bond between him, Mark, and Emily solidified. They worked as a cohesive unit, each one playing a vital role in the restaurant's success. "Order up," David called, sliding a plate of pancakes onto the pass. Mark picked it up and delivered it to a table where a family of 4 was seated. "This looks fantastic," the father said, looking up at Mark. "We read about your story. It's inspiring. We'll definitely be coming back." "Thank you," Mark replied, his heart swelling with pride. "We're glad to have you here." Throughout the day, the positive energy was palpable. Emily's drawings caught the attention of many customers, who admired her talent and often asked about the stories behind her artwork. She beamed with pride as she shared her inspirations, her confidence growing with each interaction. As the lunch rush began to wind down, Clara herself walked in, a wide smile on her face. "Looks like you're having a fantastic day," she said, taking a seat at the counter. Mark poured her a cup of coffee. "Thanks to you, Clara. We can't thank you enough for what you've done." Clara shook her head. "All I did was share your story. The real magic is what you, David, and Emily have created here. This place is special because of the people in it." Mark nodded, looking around at the bustling restaurant. "It really is. And it feels like we're just getting started." As the sun began to set, the flow of customers finally started to slow. Mark, David, and Emily gathered at one of the tables, the exhaustion of the day tempered by their sense of achievement. "I never thought we'd see this place so full again," Mark said, his voice tinged with emotion. David nodded, a look of satisfaction on his face. "We've come a long way, and it feels good to be part of something so meaningful." Emily, her eyes sparkling with excitement, added, "And there's still so much more we can do." Mark smiled at her enthusiasm. "You're right, Emily. This is just the beginning." They sat together, enjoying a moment of quiet reflection amidst the now peaceful restaurant. The journey that had brought them here had been filled with challenges, but it had also forged an unbreakable bond between them. The afternoon sun cast a warm glow over the bustling restaurant as customers chatted animatedly, enjoying their meals. Mark was behind the counter, refilling coffee cups and exchanging smiles with patrons when the door swung open, and a stern-looking man in a crisp suit entered. He held a clipboard and wore an expression of businesslike detachment. Mark's heart skipped a beat. The man approached the counter and extended his hand. "Good afternoon. I'm Inspector Johnson from the Health Department. We received an anonymous complaint about the hygiene here. I'm here to conduct an inspection." Mark's stomach churned, but he forced a smile. "Of course, Inspector. Please come in." The inspector wasted no time moving through the restaurant with a clipboard in hand, checking every corner with a critical eye. Mark followed closely, his heart pounding. David and Emily watched from a distance, their faces etched with anxiety. After what felt like an eternity, Inspector Johnson turned to Mark, his expression grim. "Mr. Mark, I'm afraid your restaurant still hasn't met the standards." Mark felt a cold sweat break out on his forehead. Inspector Johnson shook his head. "It's not enough. The kitchen equipment is outdated, the storage conditions are subpar, and your waste disposal system needs an overhaul. You have 2 weeks to comply with all the regulations, or I'll be forced to submit a report that could result in serious consequences for your business." The weight of the inspector's words hung heavy in the air. Mark glanced at David, who looked equally stunned. 2 weeks? Mark echoed, his voice barely above a whisper. "How are we supposed to manage that?" "That's for you to figure out," the inspector replied curtly. "I'm giving you a chance. Make sure you use it wisely." With that, Inspector Johnson turned and left, the door closing behind him with a finality that sent a shiver down Mark's spine. He stood there, staring at the empty space where the inspector had been, feeling a crushing sense of defeat. Emily tugged at his sleeve, her eyes wide and frightened. "Mr. Mark, are we in trouble?" Mark knelt down to her level, forcing a reassuring smile. "Don't worry, Emily. We'll figure something out. We always do." David joined them, his face drawn and worried. "Mark, what are we going to do? We don't have the money for all these upgrades." Mark sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I don't know, David, but we can't give up. We have to try." For the rest of the day, the usual bustling atmosphere of the restaurant was overshadowed by a sense of impending doom. Mark and David worked in silence, their minds racing with possibilities and worries. They went over the inspector's list again and again, trying to come up with a plan that seemed increasingly impossible. As the evening approached and the last customers left, Mark and David sat at a table, the tension between them palpable. Emily had fallen asleep on a bench, her drawings scattered around her. "We're running out of time," David said quietly, his voice filled with despair. "Even if we work around the clock, we can't afford the new equipment and repairs. We're stuck." Mark nodded, his shoulders slumping in defeat. "I know, but we can't let Emily see us like this. She needs to believe that everything will be okay." David looked over at Emily, his eyes softening. "She's been through so much already. I don't want her to lose this place too." Mark reached across the table, placing a hand on David's arm. "We'll find a way, David. We have to." They sat in silence, each lost in their own thoughts, the weight of their situation pressing down on them. The restaurant, once a beacon of hope and community, now felt like a sinking ship, and they were struggling to keep it afloat. The night deepened, and the silence in the restaurant grew heavier. Mark glanced at the clock, its ticking a cruel reminder of the limited time they had left. He looked at David, who stared blankly at the table, and felt a pang of helplessness. For the first time since they'd come together, Mark didn't have the answers. The future of the restaurant and their newfound family and the path ahead seemed more uncertain than ever. The next morning, the sunlight streamed through the windows, but the usual warmth and cheer of the restaurant were overshadowed by the weight of the previous day's inspection. Mark sat at one of the tables, staring at the list of required improvements, his mind racing for solutions. David joined him, a cup of coffee in hand, looking equally troubled. "We need a miracle," David said, breaking the silence. "I don't see how we can do this on our own." Mark nodded slowly. "We can't, but maybe we don't have to." David raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" Mark leaned forward, a spark of determination in his eyes. "This community has supported us before. Maybe if we explain our situation, they'll be willing to help again. We've got 2 weeks. It's a long shot, but it's all we've got." David considered this for a moment, then nodded. "You're right. We've got nothing to lose." They quickly put together a plan. Mark would speak to their regular customers and local businesses, while David and Emily would focus on reaching out to the neighborhood through social media and word of mouth. Later that day, Mark stood in front of a packed restaurant, his heart pounding. He cleared his throat and began, "Everyone, I need to talk to you about something important." The chatter died down as all eyes turned to him. Mark took a deep breath and continued, "Yesterday, we had a visit from the health inspector. We were told that unless we make significant improvements in the next 2 weeks, we could be shut down. We don't have the funds to make all the necessary changes on our own. We need your help." A murmur spread through the crowd, faces filled with concern and curiosity. Clara, the blogger, stood up. "What do you need, Mark? Tell us how we can help." Mark smiled gratefully. "We need supplies, labor, and funds for new equipment. Any help you can offer, no matter how small, will make a difference." David stepped forward, holding Emily's hand. "We're asking for your support, not just for us, but for this place that has become a part of our community." One by one, people began to respond. A local hardware store owner offered to donate materials. A plumber in the crowd volunteered his services. Clara promised to write another blog post detailing their plight and rallying more support. Emily, sensing the momentum, stood on a chair and held up one of her drawings. "I can sell my drawings and give the money to help Mr. Mark," she announced, her voice filled with determination. The room erupted in applause, and several people immediately lined up to purchase Emily's artwork. Mark felt a surge of hope and gratitude. The community spirit that had saved them before was coming through once again. For the next 2 weeks, the restaurant became a hive of activity. The restaurant buzzed with activity as volunteers and neighbors worked side by side. The aroma of fresh paint mingled with the familiar scents of coffee and baked goods, creating a unique blend of new beginnings and comforting familiarity. Mark moved through the space, checking on progress and lending a hand wherever needed. David was up on a ladder, carefully installing new shelves in the kitchen. "How's it looking, Mark?" he called down, wiping sweat from his forehead. Mark gave him a thumbs up. "Looking great, David. Those shelves are going to make a huge difference." Emily flitted around the room, her drawings adding splashes of color and cheer to the freshly painted walls. She approached Mark with a grin, holding up another masterpiece. "Mr. Mark, can we hang this one by the front door? It says, 'Welcome,' with lots of flowers and smiley faces." Mark knelt down to her level, smiling warmly. "That's perfect, Emily. It'll be the first thing people see when they walk in." As the day wore on, the restaurant underwent a remarkable transformation. The walls were pristine, the kitchen gleamed, and every corner of the restaurant reflected the collective effort of a community united by a common goal. Mark couldn't help but feel a swell of pride as he watched everyone come together. By late afternoon, the major repairs were complete. The volunteers began to pack up their tools, exchanging satisfied smiles and promises to return for a celebratory meal once the restaurant reopened. Mark gathered everyone for a final thank you. "I can't express how grateful I am for all your help. This place is more than just a restaurant. It's a testament to what we can achieve together." David stepped forward, his voice filled with emotion. "We couldn't have done this without all of you. Thank you for giving us the chance to make this place special again." Emily held up her drawing, now framed and ready to be hung by the front door. "This is for everyone. Thank you." The crowd cheered, and with heartfelt goodbyes, the volunteers departed, leaving Mark, David, and Emily to take a moment to absorb the transformation. The restaurant, once struggling and worn, now stood as a vibrant symbol of community spirit and resilience. A few days later, the moment they had been preparing for arrived. Inspector Johnson walked through the door, his clipboard in hand. The air was thick with anticipation as he began his inspection, moving through the kitchen, dining area, and storage spaces with meticulous attention to detail. Mark, David, and Emily watched nervously, their hearts pounding with each step the inspector took. Finally, Inspector Johnson set down his clipboard and turned to face them. "Mr. Mark, I have to say I'm impressed. You've addressed all the issues and made significant improvements. Everything looks excellent." Relief washed over them like a wave. Mark stepped forward, his voice filled with gratitude. "Thank you, Inspector Johnson. We've had a lot of help from our community." Inspector Johnson nodded, a rare smile softening his features. "It's clear that this place means a lot to many people. Keep up the good work." As the inspector left, the reality of their accomplishment began to sink in. Mark, David, and Emily stood together in the center of the restaurant, their hearts light and their spirits high. "We did it," Mark said, his voice trembling with emotion. "We really did it." David clapped Mark on the back, a broad smile on his face. "This place is better than ever, and it's all thanks to everyone's hard work." Emily jumped up and down, her excitement infectious. "Can we celebrate now, please?" Mark laughed, feeling the tension of the past weeks melt away. "Absolutely. Let's make tonight special." That evening, the restaurant reopened its doors to the community. Friends, neighbors, and volunteers filled the space, their laughter and conversation creating a lively atmosphere. The new decor, combined with Emily's vibrant artwork, made the restaurant feel welcoming and alive. Mark stood behind the counter, watching as people enjoyed their meals and shared stories. He caught David's eye and motioned for him to join. "To new beginnings," Mark said, raising a glass. David clinked his glass with Mark's. "And to the best team ever." Emily joined them, holding up a glass of juice. "To our community." As they toasted to their success, Mark felt a deep sense of gratitude. The journey had been challenging, but they had overcome every obstacle with the support of their community. The restaurant was not just a business, it was a beacon of hope and a testament to the power of unity. Later that night, as they cleaned up and prepared to close, Mark, David, and Emily took a moment to reflect. "We've built something truly special here," Mark said quietly. "And this is just the beginning." David nodded, his eyes shining with determination. The restaurant hummed with the energy of a thriving community hub. Regulars chatted animatedly at the tables, while new customers marveled at Emily's artwork adorning the walls. Mark was behind the counter, pouring coffee with a contented smile, when the doorbell chimed and a well-dressed man stepped inside. Mr. Anderson, a local investor known for supporting small businesses, approached the counter with a friendly nod. "Good afternoon, Mark. I've heard wonderful things about this place." Mark extended his hand, shaking Mr. Anderson's firmly. "Thank you. We've worked hard to get here. What brings you in today?" Mr. Anderson's eyes sparkled with interest. "I'd like to discuss an opportunity. Do you have a moment?" Mark glanced around the busy restaurant. "David, can you handle things here for a bit?" David, who was chatting with a customer, gave a thumbs up. "Absolutely, Mark. Take your time." Mark led Mr. Anderson to a quieter corner of the restaurant. They settled into a booth, and Mr. Anderson leaned forward, his voice filled with enthusiasm. "I've been following your progress, and I'm impressed by how you've turned this place around. I believe there's potential for expansion. How would you feel about opening a second location?" Mark's heart skipped a beat. The idea of expanding was both exhilarating and daunting. "I'm flattered, Mr. Anderson, but it's a big step. I'd need to discuss it with my team first." "Of course," Mr. Anderson said, his tone understanding. "Take your time. I'm confident that with your dedication and community spirit, you can make it work." After Mr. Anderson left, Mark gathered David and Emily in the back room. "We need to talk," he began, his voice steady but filled with excitement. "Mr. Anderson wants to invest in a second location." David's eyes widened in surprise. "That's incredible, Mark. But it's also a huge responsibility. Are we ready for this?" Emily, her eyes sparkling with curiosity, asked, "What does that mean, Mr. Mark? Would we have another restaurant?" Mark nodded, feeling a mixture of pride and caution. "Yes, Emily. It means we'd be able to share what we've built here with another community. But it's a big decision. We need to make sure we can handle it, without losing what makes this place special." David leaned back, deep in thought. "We've built something unique here, Mark. Our community spirit is our greatest asset. If we expand, we need to ensure we bring that same spirit to the new location." Emily piped up, her voice filled with determination. "We can do it. We can make the new place just as special. I can make more drawings to welcome everyone." Mark smiled at her enthusiasm. "You're right, Emily, and with our community's support, we can make it happen." They spent the next few days discussing the logistics, weighing the pros and cons, and envisioning how they could replicate their success. The excitement grew, tempered by a careful consideration of the challenges ahead. Mark met with Mr. Anderson again, sharing their vision and concerns. "We're on board," Mark said, his voice firm. "But we want to ensure that the new location embodies the same values. Community support and a welcoming atmosphere are non-negotiable." Mr. Anderson nodded, his respect for their commitment evident. "I wouldn't have it any other way. Let's make this happen." The announcement of the new location was met with enthusiasm from their patrons. The community rallied around them once more, offering help and encouragement. Mark, David, and Emily visited potential sites, finally selecting a cozy spot in a neighboring town that shared the same close-knit vibe. As renovations began, the trio divided their time between the original restaurant and the new location. Emily's drawings of the journey were posted online, drawing support and excitement from both communities. Volunteers from their current customers offered to help set up the new place, bringing a sense of continuity and unity. One evening, as they were closing up the original restaurant, Mark gathered David and Emily for a quiet moment. "We're on the brink of something incredible," he said, his voice filled with emotion. "We've turned a dream into reality once, and now we're doing it again." David nodded, his eyes reflecting the same mixture of excitement and caution. "We've got a lot of work ahead, but I know we can do it. Together." Emily hugged them both, her youthful optimism shining through. "We're the best team, and we'll make the new place just as amazing." As they locked the doors and stepped out into the cool night air, the future felt bright and full of promise. The decision to expand was not just about growing a business. It was about spreading the spirit of community and resilience they had cultivated. With their bond stronger than ever and the support of their neighbors, Mark, David, and Emily were ready to take on this new challenge. The grand opening of the second restaurant location was a day bathed in the warm glow of anticipation and excitement. The new spot, nestled in a charming neighborhood, was abuzz with activity as locals gathered to celebrate. The air was filled with a tantalizing aroma of freshly cooked food, mingling with the sound of laughter and conversation. Mark stood at the entrance, greeting guests with a welcoming smile. Beside him, David adjusted the final touches on the decorations, while Emily flitted around, her eyes wide with excitement as she handed out her latest drawings to the new customers. As the evening approached, the restaurant filled to capacity, the energy vibrant and infectious. The community had turned out in droves, eager to support the new venture. Mark took a moment to step back and take it all in. The sight of happy faces, the clinking of glasses, and the hum of contented chatter filled him with a profound sense of pride and accomplishment. At the center of the room stood a small stage, adorned with lights and flowers. Mark made his way to it, signaling for everyone's attention. The room gradually quieted, all eyes turning towards him. He cleared his throat, his heart pounding with a mix of nerves and excitement. "Thank you all for being here tonight," Mark began, his voice steady but emotional. "When we started this journey, our goal was to create a place where people could feel at home, a place built on community and support. The success of our first location was only possible because of the incredible people who believed in us and shared in our vision." He paused, glancing over at David and Emily, who stood beaming with pride. "David and Emily have been my rock throughout this journey. Their dedication and hard work have made this dream a reality. And now, with the opening of this new location, we're not just expanding our business, we're expanding our family." The room erupted in applause, the sound resonating with heartfelt emotion. Mark continued, his eyes scanning the crowd. "This new beginning wouldn't be possible without each and every one of you. We promise to bring the same spirit of community and care to this new location." David stepped forward, taking the microphone. "Mark's right. This place isn't just about food, it's about people. We've built something special, and with your continued support, we'll keep growing and bringing people together." Emily, clutching her sketchbook, added in her clear, youthful voice, "Thank you for helping us. I drew pictures to make everyone happy, and I hope you like them." The crowd laughed and clapped, their hearts warmed by Emily's innocence and enthusiasm. Mark's chest swelled with pride. He took the microphone back, his voice filled with resolve and optimism. "Here's to new beginnings and endless possibilities. Together, we can achieve anything." The celebration continued late into the night. The restaurant buzzed with life, filled with the joyful noise of a community coming together. Old friends reconnected, and new friendships were forged. As the last of the guests trickled out, Mark, David, and Emily took a moment to stand in the center of their new restaurant, soaking in the atmosphere. The tables were empty now, but the space was still alive with the echoes of laughter and joy. "We did it," Mark said softly, his voice thick with emotion. We really did it. David clapped him on the back, his smile broad and genuine. This is just the beginning, Mark. There's so much more ahead of us. They locked up the restaurant and stepped out into the cool night air, the stars twinkling above them like promises of future successes. This new beginning is more than I ever imagined, Mark said, his voice reflecting the depth of his gratitude. We've built something beautiful together. David nodded, his expression thoughtful. And we'll keep building, one step at a time. Emily skipped ahead, turning to face them with a grin. Onward and upward.